Carnival of Souls is one of the first no-budget, truly independent horror films ever made. It inspired countless imitators, as well as horror masters like George A. Romero and David Lynch, and yet how many of you have seen or even heard of it? Until Criterion released it a year or two ago, I'd never heard of it either. One of those cult classics that stays pretty firmly in the cult, unlike something like Big Lebowski, which has become as mainstream as frickin' Power Rangers. It's one of the most hypnotic, spellbinding, and creepy flicks of the 60s, or really any decade. It's not hugely terrifying or anything, but it lingers with you, haunting your thoughts after watching it, even when occasionally making you laugh at the blatant low-budget or goofy production values. Carnival opens immediately with a young woman and her friends having a little joyride before driving off a bridge into the water, where the opening credits begin. The score by Gene Moore is entirely performed on organ, which will definitely drive you nuts at times, but it's also extremely effective in drawing you into the atmosphere of the flick. It really ranks up there with the classic horror scores like Psycho or Jaws or Halloween, in that I can't picture any other music working as well, even if it frequently makes me want to pull my hair out. People start searching for the drowned girls, and we're all treated to some hilariously bad ADR and dubbing, with the lips barely even matching the dialogue.
Alright, now let's hear your story about how it happened.
It wasn't our fault, sir.
Yeah?
We were the first ones on the bridge, and coming along, following the tracks, and they wanted to get around us, I guess, and they lost control when they dropped off.
You sure you didn't crowd them off?
Because this is the beginning of the film, I can see a lot of people giving up already when looking at something so amateurish, but that's the lucky power of dreamlike, nightmarish movies. They can get away with bad acting or lousy filmmaking at times because it all adds to this weird, unsettling feeling. Our heroine Mary, played by Candice Lagos, somehow escaped the car and is saved. She's leaving town to go to work as a church organist because apparently in 1962 you could make a living playing the organ for 2 hours a week. Her car drive there is another scene that reminds me of Psycho, yet this one is even more terrifying than that film as she gets her first visions of a scary zombie dude. For a movie that's almost 60 years old, this scene still creeps me right the f*** out, and that feeling lingers the next few times we see the man popping up. She moves into her new boarding house with an old landlord, reminding me the most of a David Lynch performer, someone who seems like a really awful actor until you realize they're talking like a robot on purpose.
I knew you'd like it. This ain't no regular rooming house, you know. I only got you and Mr. Linden across the hall.
She also meets her neighbor, a creepy douchey horny toe that usually can only say about 2 sentences to her before trying to see her naked.
Let's have no more nights.
Or let's make them more interesting.
The scenes with him are uncomfortable, but the scenes with the ghost dude are fantastically unnerving, still to this day. Fun note is that because the movie had such a low budget with only a crew of 5 frickin' people, that this villainous apparition is actually played by the director himself, Herc Harvey. So this already isn't a very effective review, to be honest, because so much of the movie's power comes from sitting and watching and being immersed in its hypnotic, nightmarish style. Seeing the images are one thing, but seeing them coupled with that incessant organ blaring in your ears is another thing altogether. Mary begins her job at the church, the pastor taking her out to see the abandoned carnival on the edge of Salt Lake City that she keeps feeling inexplicably drawn towards. This carnival, which sadly burned down a few years after filming, is one of the most evocative movie locations I can think of. There's just something about it that gives me the creeps, I don't know what it is. Another really bizarre and awesome scene is when Mary is shopping and then suddenly, disappears from the world where no one can see or hear her.
I did say I'd take it. What's the matter with her? What's the matter with everyone?
The rippling effect that starts it is a good visual representation of the initial drowning scene. Thanks, my wife, for catching that. Now I sound way smarter in this review than I did before. Anyways, Mary snaps out of it and literally runs right into a psychologist, whose scenes in the film are definitely among the weakest of the flick. There's just no sense trying to explain the unexplainable. But then this is a pretty short movie, only about 78 minutes long, so a bit of padding doesn't hurt it too much. Her days continue to be a fog of weird or creepy shit until she goes back to the church and trips total balls. Goss doesn't give a terrific performance in the film, admittedly, but she's very good at scenes like this when her mind is completely bonkers, and again, that organ just works perfectly with all the spinning camera work and creepy zombie faces. The pastor hates her Georgie legetting his pretty organ and fires her, which leads to a disastrous date with a drunken asshole neighbor. She totally wigs out and the next morning is kicked out of the boarding house. She goes to get her car fixed on the way out of town and loses her noggin, once again becoming invisible to the world. If all of these scenes sound episodic, well, that's accurate, and if the dialogue and performances seem weird and unmannered, well, that's true. Carnival of Souls isn't a straightforward narrative with a simple story. It exists purely to represent a bad dream you can't escape from, and within that subgenre, it's actually better than a lot of David Lynch flicks like Eraserhead and Eraserhead. Watch that goddamn thing twice, and I still don't know what the hell to make of it. Anyway, she runs all the way back to the carnival and is quickly swamped with the zombie dancer creeps. This final act is not exactly as terrifying as it probably once was. Some shots are almost comical, like how the ghosts are clearly just waving their hands in front of the camera to look spookier, or how when she escapes under a dock, the main ghoul is suddenly hiding behind a bunch of straw. Haha, I'm here, what a surprise. But it's still effective in getting under the skin and staying there, especially once the rug is pulled out from under us for the big twist ending, decades before Sixth Sense pulled it off. In the initial accident on the bridge, she never did escape the car, and the entire movie was either her waking nightmare in the moment of death, or maybe the afterlife she's been living in long after dying. I don't know. Point is, she's frickin' dead. Sure, we've seen that twist a lot now, but back then, not so much.
The car's still over there, and then the footprints leading up to here. And then nothing.
Carnival of Souls has a lot of problems, mostly stemming from the quick and cheap way it was shot. In the zombie dance scene, you can clearly see the camera rig obscuring the entire left quarter of the screen, and after her bad date, you can actually see the actors waiting on the stairs for a second before beginning to act. A hilariously bad mistake that should have been easily fixed in editing. Yet like I mentioned, when you're dealing with a dream state type movie, you forgive a lot of these things because they do add to the overall atmosphere, and I feel especially forgiving because the flick as a whole is so goddamn creepy. The lead actress only worked in 2 other films, and the director actually never again made a feature film, sticking mostly to educational videos, and holy an episode of Reading Rainbow? Are you shitting me? Oh my god. The Lackluster Box Office Souls God is a shame, because if it was a bigger hit at the time, we probably would have seen these two work on other films, and especially in terms of Harvey, the world missed out on a really creative talent. I give Carnival of Souls 4 fries out of 5, and definitely hope some of you give it a chance and either rent or buy the Criterion Blu-ray, which just looks and sounds fantastic. Turn off the lights, put your phone away, and let the movie suck you up into its weird, organ-playing, ethereal world. It's a lot of fun.
Look, I got a couple of shots left over from last night. You want a little bit in yours?
No, thanks. It's not the recommended breakfast for a church organist.
Blame it on the alcohol, blame it on the